On to the first sip. The U.S., France, and Great Britain assert that they bombed Syria to stop the use of chemical weapons banned under international law since just after World War I. The war in Syria has caused that nation of almost 20 million to have nearly 1 out of 3 people be displaced or homeless, turned 1 out of 5 into refugees living outside the country, and led to more than 450,000 deaths. That means that everyone in Syria knows someone who has been killed by the conflict. An overwhelming majority of these deaths have been caused by non-chemical weapons that are totally legal under international law. So exactly what message is being sent by U.S. bombs? Here to help me answer that is Jamille Bigio, Senior Fellow in the Women and Foreign Policy Program at the Council on Foreign Relations. She served on the National Security Council in the Obama administration. Jamille, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
First of all, before we sort of turn to Syria, I wanted to just ask you about North Korea. There's been a lot of movement on North Korea this week, as you know, and I know that it's not your area of expertise sort of geographically, but you have made foreign policy inside a presidential administration. And so I'm wondering if from the outside, does it look like this is a coherent policy? Is this the way that you would normally go about trying to decide how to relate to another country?
First, of course, in any foreign policy conversation, the results are what's critical. So there is news out today that North Korea has signaled that it will suspend its nuclear testing, which is a significant win going into the talks. It's important to have the peace treaty between North and South Korea, but for it to result in the U.S. withdrawing troops from South Korea as a condition is also something that the U.S. should never pursue.
On to Syria. What message are we sending to Assad? Are we saying that it's okay to kill people with certain types of weapons or other? Is our military intervention just that without a strategy for actually how to end the war? I mean, what's your take?
First off, it is important that when a country uses weapons of mass destruction, that we do send a signal that that's wrong and that we won't permit that. But at the same time, we by no means want the message to be that it's okay that a government kills and terrorizes its own citizens so long as it doesn't use chemical weapons. The U.S. really needs to up its response to the Syrian refugees. More than 10 million people have been displaced by the conflict, whether within Syria or to neighboring countries.
Mm-hmm. What has been the disproportionate impact of the war on women and girls?
Right. So first off, we see over 3 million children in Syria and in the refugee camps do not have access to education at all. So this is a lost generation of children that have not had the opportunity to learn, and their entire futures will be affected by it. We see that half of health facilities in the country are destroyed, are shut or not fully functioning. We also see that there's been an increase in gender-based violence, whether this is sexual violence being used to terrorize communities and terrorize women and men, or it's an uptick in domestic violence with the stresses of the conflict. We've also seen an increase in early marriage. So more and more girls are being married off at younger and younger ages with families not able to support them. But on the flip side, we've also seen an uptick in the roles that women are serving in their communities. And this is one thing we see in conflicts, that there's a breakdown in some of the gender norms that keep women out of politics, keep them out of the workplace.
It's like World War II here. Or other,
right, exactly. So you're seeing that in Syria, that you see women organizing, engaging in political roles in their communities. You see them taking jobs that they never took before, whether their husbands have been killed and they're now the head of the household and they have to work, or because of the economic challenges, now both parents need to work in many families. So you see women working in police forces to ensure security. You see them collecting garbage. You see them working in shops, opening shops in ways that they never did before. So our hope is certainly that once things do turn a corner in Syria, that women are able to maintain those positions that they had. You mentioned World War II. Here in America, many women went back into the home and it took time before they were able to re-engage and seek education opportunities and take the same roles in the workplace that they had during the war. Hopefully we don't see that pattern in Syria, and that women are able to, if they want, to maintain their position and their voice in making decisions about their communities, about their homes.
Right. One last quick question. I want you to just recap the hope, right? Because it sounds, one of the things you mentioned in your earlier answer is that women are the hope. So can you just talk briefly again? You mentioned some of the initiatives as well,
Right.
But just the way in which what's happening there, women can be the turnaround.
Right. We have seen this all over the world, that when women are engaged, they are not looking at power sharing arrangements. They're not focused on where's the territory, who has the best power positions in government. They're focused on are their kids getting access to school? Are their kids getting access to healthcare? Do they have access to housing? What's happening for justice? What's happening for economic opportunities? So they're focused on the issues that will actually help a society stabilize and regrow after a conflict. And we're seeing that happening in Syria right now. Syrian women are stepping in to negotiate local ceasefires where it's too dangerous for their husbands to go out, where they might be shot. Women are taking advantage of some of the gender norms where they are able to engage publicly in public spaces in a way that their husbands may not be able to, and they're negotiating those local ceasefires. They're negotiating detainees being released. They are helping to negotiate space for their families to live safely. And at the same time, they're helping to make sure that health facilities are half of them are still up and running, and that's because of the support that women are providing. And they are keeping their eye on what the needs are of their communities and trying to feed that up into the bigger peace negotiations and debates that are happening. And it's now in the responsibility of the U.S. government, the United Nations, and others to help make sure that women have a seat at the table, that the needs that they're expressing are being heard, that money is making it to them. We see in post-conflict, in conflict settings, that 0.4% of all of the dollars that go into fragile states actually make it to local women's groups, despite all that they are doing to meet the needs of their families and communities. More of that money should be getting there, and the U.S. can help ensure that that happens.
Thank you for sticking around and talking to us in this Web Extra. One of the questions that I have for you is, and what you've done a lot of work on, is that women are essential to peacemaking and peacekeeping, and that this could be the case in Syria. How so?
Yes, so we've seen, first off, just to note that when women are at the table, it makes a peace agreement 64% less likely to fail, and it makes it 35% more likely to last at least 15 years. So when we look at the fact that peace agreements fail all over the world, that civil wars reoccur all over the world, then the fact that women's participation actually makes a peace agreement more likely and more likely to last is critical. And yet it hasn't translated into ensuring that women have a seat at the table. So that's something that we at the Council on Foreign Relations have researched and recommended steps of ways that governments can help make sure that women do have that opportunity. Because what we've seen is that when women are in negotiations, they are seen as honest brokers. So they're able to speak between opposing parties and armed groups, and to pass messages and to help negotiate and to keep parties at the table so that they can actually reach an agreement. That we saw that in Liberia during the conflict there, that women actually barred parties from leaving the room until they had reached an agreement.
Wow.
We also see that women are able to work across divides. So in Northern Ireland, for example, we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. What few people are recognizing right now is the role that women played in that agreement. They actually...
it's only the men that you see all the time.
Exactly. But women took advantage of a political election that they held just before the negotiations. They formed a cross-party across religion political party. So they brought Catholics and Protestants together into one party and got enough votes that they had a formal seat at the table. And they used that to help put priorities like housing and justice and education on the table, things that help ensure that after an agreement is actually signed, that communities benefit from it and that they're invested in it and help ensure that it continues. Women also organized around the public referendum to make sure that the agreement got the yes vote. And during the agreement, when there was a moment where Sinn Féin, one of the parties, left the table, the women had a back channel with them. They were seen as honest brokers, and they were able to maintain a back channel with them and to keep them in the conversation. We also see that women have different roles in society, in their communities, and their families, and they have different information because of it. Mm-hmm. And that's able to sometimes break impasses. This happened in Darfur. Two parties were fighting over control of a river, that when women heard that, they reported that because they were the ones who actually collected water, they could tell the parties that actually that river had dried up. And it had been blocking the negotiations for days, but women were able to use their role, their perspective, as in this case, the ones who collected the water, to help break an impasse in the negotiation. We also see that women are able to, post-conflict, invest in the kinds of services that communities need to recover. And that means that they're able to more effectively distribute resources, housing, water, healthcare, et cetera, so that communities are actually able to rebuild again. When women are in security forces, they are more effective at actually keeping the peace. So we see, first off, that they are able to access populations and venues that their male counterparts can't, which provides critical intelligence on potential risks. Mm-hmm. They're able to search women, closing a loophole that extremists are using right now, where they are having women arming them as suicide bombers and assuming that there aren't going to be female police on the other side to search them and that women are going to be able to move freely. Mm-hmm. But we also see that women are more likely to de-escalate tensions and are less likely to use excessive force when they do it. So it means they actually are able to rebuild trust with communities in a different way than their male counterparts can. And we've seen reports from communities of exactly that they feel better heard by women in uniform, that they see women as more likely to de-escalate tensions and to help resolve conflicts. And that's especially critical in conflicts where the security force may have been seen by communities as either an actor who hurt communities or that wasn't there to protect communities when they needed it. So to rebuild that trust is a critical role.
Great. Thank you for that, and thank you for this web extra. I really appreciate you doing that and giving us that information about the way in which women can actually help keep the peace, make the peace and keep the peace in ways that are better than men. I don't think that that's something that we know about, so thanks for sharing that.